Captain Jake Morrison had exactly three things on his mind as he approached the diplomatic scanner aboard the luxury vessel. Peaceful intentions. His morning coffee was getting cold, his paperwork was overdue, and he really wished he'd stayed in insurance. At least insurance adjusters didn't have to deal with six-armed aliens who insisted on shaking every single hand during introductions. "Just a routine scan, Captain," chirped Pip, the overly enthusiastic junior diplomat who somehow made every mundane procedure sound like the discovery of fire. "Standard security clearance for the Corvani Trade Federation meeting. Should take 30 seconds, tops." Jake nodded absently, watching Vex, their Zentorian navigator, nervously adjust his translator collar for the 15th time in 5 minutes. Poor guy looked like he was about to face a firing squad instead of a simple first-contact trade negotiation. Then again, Vex approached ordering lunch with the same level of cosmic anxiety, so this was pretty much Tuesday for him. Commander Brass stood at attention nearby, her military bearing so rigid you could probably use her spine as a ruler. She'd been assigned to their diplomatic mission as security oversight, which mostly meant she got to look disapproving whenever Jake made jokes during alien greeting ceremonies, which, to be fair, was most of the time. "The Corvani are known for their punctuality," Brass announced, consulting her tablet with the enthusiasm of someone reading a tax code manual. "We cannot afford any delays in the security protocol." Jake stepped into the scanner, already mentally rehearsing his opening remarks about Earth's excellent coffee exports and questionable reality television. The machine hummed to life, running its usual checks for weapons, diseases, and whatever else might disrupt a peaceful trade negotiation. He'd been through these scanners hundreds of times, boring, routine, and about as exciting as watching paint dry in zero gravity. Then every alarm in the ship started screaming. The scanner's display erupted in flashing red text that was visible from 3 decks away. "Critical threat detected. Bearer of the oath that broke empires." The machine didn't just beep. It shrieked like it had discovered the galactic equivalent of the plague carrying a nuclear weapon. Jake looked down at himself, then back at the panicking display, then at his crew who were staring at him like he'd spontaneously grown tentacles. Guys, I think your scanner's broken." Pip's enthusiasm evaporated faster than water in a vacuum. Vex turned approximately 14 shades paler, which was impressive considering his species was naturally translucent. Commander Brass actually dropped her tablet, a breach of military composure so severe that Jake briefly wondered if reality itself had malfunctioned. "Bearer of the oath that broke empires," Brass read aloud, her voice carrying the same tone most people reserved for announcing the end of the world. "What oath, Morrison? What empires?" Jake shrugged, genuinely baffled. "Lady, the most serious oath I've ever made was promising my ex-wife I'd remember to take out the garbage. And I broke that one regularly." He gestured at the still screaming scanner. "This thing's obviously having some kind of electronic nervous breakdown. Maybe it needs a software update." But as he spoke, something cold settled in his stomach. Because in all his diplomatic training, in all the boring safety manuals and routine procedures, nobody had ever mentioned what happened when a scanner detected something called the oath that broke empires. And judging by the looks on everyone's faces, that wasn't because it was common. Within exactly 17 minutes of the scanner incident, Jake's communication console lit up like a Christmas tree having a seizure. Messages flooded in from every corner of the galaxy, each one more panicked than the last. The Hive Mind Collective, normally as emotionally stable as a sedated rock, sent a message that simply read, "We are building bunkers. Many bunkers. All the bunkers." The Ethereal Council, who usually communicated through interpretive dance and philosophical poetry, broke a 1,000-year tradition by sending a direct text message. "Emergency session called. Universe may be ending. Refreshments will be provided." "This is insane," Jake muttered, scrolling through increasingly frantic communications. "The Regelian Commerce Guild is offering to pay us tribute. The Andorian Defense Fleet is asking if we need anything. Anything at all. The Zeta Reticuli Tourism Board wants to name a vacation planet after me. I haven't even done anything." Vex, who had been frantically researching galactic databases, looked up with the expression of someone who'd just solved a puzzle and discovered the answer was cosmic horror. Captain, I've been trying to find information about this oath that broke empires, and the results are concerning. Define concerning, Jake said, though he was pretty sure he didn't want to know. Well, most of the historical records are classified above my clearance level. The ones I can access are mostly redacted. But the fragments I found keep mentioning things like consequences beyond imagination, the price of defying humanity, and something called the Detroit Incident. Jake nearly choked on his coffee. Detroit? As in Detroit, Michigan? As in my hometown, Detroit? The very same. Apparently something happened there 50,000 years ago that made several galactic empires disappear. Commander Brass, who had been maintaining radio silence with Galactic Command, finally ended her call and approached with the grim expression of someone who'd just been told to defuse a bomb while juggling flaming torches. Morrison, Command wants to know your complete genetic lineage going back 50 generations. My what now? Lady, I can barely remember my own social security number. You want me to trace my family tree back to the Stone Age? They're particularly interested in any ancestors who might have been involved in diplomatic incidents. Jake laughed, but it came out more hysterical than humorous. My family's about as undiplomatic as they come. My dad was a mechanic who once got into a shouting match with a parking meter. My mom organized bake sales. My grandmother made really aggressive quilts. The most diplomatic thing any of my ancestors ever did was probably saying please and thank you at the grocery store. But even as he spoke, something nagged at him. A half-remembered story his grandfather used to tell about their family being special. Jake had always assumed the old man was just being sentimental. Families were supposed to be special, right? That was like Grandfather 101. Pip, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. Captain, I've been monitoring galactic news feeds. Every major news network is running stories about humanity. They're calling us things like the species that walks between stars and the children of the ancient promise. One Corvani broadcaster referred to humans as those terrifying primates who smile before they destroy civilizations. Terrifying? Me? Jake looked down at himself again. He was wearing a rumpled diplomatic uniform, had coffee stains on his shirt, and was pretty sure he had a mustard stain on his tie from lunch yesterday. I'm about as terrifying as a golden retriever with anxiety issues. Vex's translator collar made a strangled beeping sound. Captain, with respect, golden retrievers are actually quite terrifying to my species. They're so enthusiastic, and they have those eyes that seem to look directly into your soul. That's not helping, Vex. As if summoned by their conversation, another priority message arrived, this one from the Corvani Trade Federation themselves. The message was short, direct, and about as friendly as a tax audit. Humans will present themselves for evaluation immediately. Failure to comply will result in consequences. The Corvani Trade Federation does not negotiate with primitives. Jake stared at the message, feeling something strange stirring in his chest. It wasn't fear exactly. It was more like the feeling he got when customer service representatives put him on hold for 3 hours, then told him his problem wasn't their department. It was annoyance. Deep cosmic level annoyance. Well, Jake said, his voice carrying an edge that made everyone in the room take a step back. I guess we're about to find out what all this oath business is really about. The research session that followed could generously be described as archaeological detective work, or more accurately, as 4 people trying to solve a cosmic mystery with the galactic equivalent of Wikipedia, while everything around them caught fire. Vex had managed to access progressively higher security databases by claiming it was a cultural research emergency, which apparently was a real thing in galactic bureaucracy. What they found made Jake wish he'd stayed in insurance even more than usual. Okay, Vex announced, his voice trembling with the excitement of someone who had just uncovered the universe's biggest secret and was absolutely terrified by it. I've pieced together fragments from 17 different historical archives, and the story goes like this. He activated the holographic display, showing a timeline that stretched back 50,000 years. Ancient Earth, early human civilization. Most of the galaxy was under the control of something called the Dominion Emperor, a being so powerful that entire star systems would surrender, rather than face his wrath. Jake leaned back in his chair. Let me guess, he wasn't the friendly neighborhood type? The records describe him as a force of pure conquest and the darkness between stars made manifest. He'd already enslaved or destroyed 90% of all known civilizations. Then his scouts discovered a small blue planet in what you humans call the Sol system. Commander Brass frowned at the display. Earth was barely out of its Stone Age 50,000 years ago. What could ancient humans possibly do against a galactic empire? That's where it gets interesting, Vex continued, manipulating the hologram to show Earth. The Dominion Emperor sent a standard surrender demand to humanity. Submit to his rule, become his slaves, or face complete annihilation. Standard procedure for him. Pip, who had been taking notes like his life depended on it, looked up. And humanity said no? Not exactly. According to the fragments I found, one human representative met with the Emperor's envoys. The records don't give his name, but they describe him as someone who spoke with the voice of his entire species. When presented with the surrender ultimatum, this human made what the archives call the oath. Jake felt that strange stirring in his chest again, stronger this time. What kind of oath? Vex's translation collar made nervous clicking sounds as he read from the ancient text. I speak for all who call Earth home, for all who carry human blood, for all who will come after us. We reject your dominion. We reject your empire. We reject your rule. Should any force attempt to enslave or destroy humanity, they will face consequences beyond their imagination. This I swear by the bonds that tie us to the stars themselves. The bridge fell silent except for the quiet hum of ship systems. Finally, Jake spoke. And then what happened? The Dominion Emperor laughed, called humans amusing primitives, said he'd return in 1,000 years to claim their world, just to let them contemplate their fate. But he never made it back, Commander Brass said quietly. Vex shook his head. The Dominion Empire collapsed within a century. The records are vague about how, but they mention impossible coincidences, technology failures at critical moments, and the universe itself turning against the Emperor. His fleets vanished, his worlds rebelled, and the Emperor himself disappeared into what the archives call the space between thoughts. Jake stood up and started pacing, his mind racing. Okay, so some ancient human made a dramatic oath and a big bad empire fell apart. That doesn't explain why every alien in the galaxy is currently hiding under their beds because a scanner read my DNA. Pip cleared his throat nervously. Captain, there's more. I've been cross-referencing galactic historical records with human expansion into space. Every time humanity has been threatened, really threatened, something has happened to the aggressors. What kind of something? Well, remember the Vegan supremacy wars? The ones where the Vegans declared humans to be inferior and tried to blockade Earth? Yeah, ended when their entire fleet's navigation systems malfunctioned simultaneously, and they got lost in space for 3 years. And the Rigelian incident? When they demanded humanity pay tribute for polluting space with their primitive culture? Jake nodded slowly. Their homeworld's weather control system went haywire, and it rained chocolate milk for 6 months. They're still in therapy over it. Every single threat to humanity, Pip continued, ends the same way. Not through military action, not through diplomacy, but through the most impossibly convenient series of coincidences in galactic history. Commander Brass was studying her tablet with the intensity of someone trying to solve the universe's greatest mystery. Morrison, I've been reviewing our diplomatic success rate. 97%. Do you know what the galactic average is for successful first contact negotiations? No idea. 12%. We're not just successful, Morrison. We're impossibly successful. And now I'm wondering if it's not because we're good diplomats. Jake stopped pacing and looked at his crew. Really looked at them. Vex, brilliant but anxious, who somehow always found exactly the right information at exactly the right time. Pip, enthusiastic and lucky, who'd never failed to charm even the most hostile aliens. Commander Brass, whose military record showed an impossible string of victories that always seemed to come down to enemy equipment failures at crucial moments. So what you're all telling me, Jake said slowly, is that I'm part of a species that accidentally became the galaxy's most feared enforcers because some ancestor of mine made a cosmic pinky swear 50,000 years ago. Vex nodded enthusiastically. That's exactly what we're telling you. Jake looked out at the stars through the viewport, feeling the weight of 50 millennia of cosmic coincidence settling on his shoulders. Well, he said finally, that explains why customer service representatives always cave when I get really annoyed. The Corvani response to humanity's evaluation arrived exactly 3 hours later, delivered with all the diplomatic subtlety of a brick through a window. Their message was broadcast on all frequencies, ensuring that half the galaxy could watch what they clearly intended to be humanity's public humiliation. Admiral Krextar of the Corvani Trade Federation appeared on screen, his forearms crossed in what Jake assumed was their species' version of looking intimidating. Unfortunately for Krextar, he looked more like an angry office manager who'd discovered someone had been stealing his lunch from the break room refrigerator. Humans, Krextar announced in a voice that suggested he'd been practicing this speech in the mirror. Your reputation is built on lies and fear-mongering. The Corvani Trade Federation does not bow to primitive species who have barely learned to leave their own solar system. You will submit to our authority, accept our terms for galactic commerce, or face the consequences. Jake, who had been having what could charitably be described as the worst day of his career, felt his eyes start twitching. Did he just call us primitive? He did. Vex confirmed unhelpfully. After our scanner literally identified me as some kind of cosmic enforcer? Yes. And he thinks threatening Earth is a good idea? Apparently so, Captain. The Corvani Admiral continued his speech, warming to his theme like a bad karaoke singer who thought volume could compensate for talent. To demonstrate our resolve, we are dispatching a blockade fleet to your pathetic homeworld. Perhaps watching their planet slowly starve will teach these apes their proper place in the galactic hierarchy. That did it. Jake had reached his limit, not just for the day, but possibly for his entire diplomatic career. The coffee machine had broken that morning, leaving him caffeine-deprived. His paperwork had somehow multiplied overnight like bureaucratic rabbits. Pip had spent 2 hours asking increasingly detailed questions about proper greeting protocols for 17 different alien species. And now some four-armed middle manager was threatening to starve his entire homeworld because he was having a power trip. Oh, for crying out loud, Jake muttered. But something strange happened as he spoke. His voice carried differently, resonating with an authority he didn't recognize. The words seemed to echo in ways that defied the ship's acoustics, and every person on the bridge took an involuntary step backward. You want to blockade Earth? Jake continued, his annoyance growing with each word. You want to starve 8 billion people because your feelings got hurt by a security scanner? You know what? Fine, go ahead and try. As Jake's voice rose, strange things began happening. The lights on the bridge flickered, but not in a power failure way. More like they were keeping time with his heartbeat. The ship's computer system started humming in harmony, creating an almost musical backdrop to his words. I've been doing this job for 7 years, Jake said, his voice now carrying a weight that seemed to press against reality itself. 7 years of dealing with bureaucrats and petty tyrants and species who think conquest is a legitimate business model. And you know what I've learned? The holographic display showing Admiral Krextar began to flicker, and in the background of the Corvani transmission, alarm sounds started blaring. I've learned that the universe has a sense of humor, Jake continued, his ordinary diplomatic uniform seeming somehow more imposing than it had moments before. And it really doesn't like bullies. On the screen, Admiral Krextar was frantically pressing controls as his ship's systems began malfunctioning around him. His weapon systems powered down with a whine of dying machinery. His navigation display started showing what appeared to be his fleet's position, as somewhere inside a black hole. And from every speaker on every ship in his blockade fleet, a familiar song began playing at maximum volume. Is that? Pip whispered. Rick Astley, Commander Brass confirmed grimly. They're being rickrolled by the universe itself. Jake wasn't finished. The stress of the day, the cosmic revelations, and the sheer audacity of threatening his homeworld had combined into something that transcended ordinary irritation and entered the realm of cosmic annoyance. You want to know about consequences beyond imagination? Here's a consequence for you. Every time you try to intimidate someone smaller than you, every time you threaten innocent people, every time you decide conquest is easier than commerce, the universe itself is going to remind you why that's a bad idea. The Corvani fleet on the screen was now completely disabled, drifting helplessly as their ship's computer systems displayed increasingly creative error messages. One ship's main display had somehow been reprogrammed to show nothing but cat videos. Another was broadcasting the complete works of Shakespeare in Corvani translation, read by what sounded like a very bored computer voice. Admiral Krextar, his forearms now gesticulating frantically, finally managed to restore partial communications. His voice came through with a quality that suggested he'd swallowed his pride along with a healthy dose of cosmic terror. We surrender. Please. We're sorry. We'll sign any trade agreement you want. Just make it stop. Jake blinked, suddenly feeling like himself again. The strange authority drained out of his voice, leaving him feeling vaguely embarrassed about the whole outburst. Make what stop? The music, the cats, the poetry. Make it all stop. Looking at the chaos he'd apparently caused, Jake felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and bewilderment. He'd just watched an entire alien fleet get defeated by the cosmic equivalent of a practical joke, and somehow he was responsible for it. Well, he said finally, his voice back to its normal, slightly sarcastic tone, I guess we should probably discuss those trade agreements now, and maybe invest in a better coffee machine for the ship. The aftermath of what galactic news networks were already calling the Corvani humiliation played out like a cosmic comedy of errors, if comedies of errors typically involved entire fleets surrendering to species they'd tried to intimidate 5 minutes earlier. Jake sat in his quarters, staring at a bottle of something Vex had assured him was definitely not toxic to humans, while trying to process what had just happened. The rational part of his mind insisted that the whole thing had been an elaborate coincidence. Alien technology was notoriously glitchy after all. Maybe the Corvani fleet had just picked the worst possible time for a system-wide malfunction. The rest of his mind, however, was having a harder time dismissing the growing pile of evidence that his species might be walking around with the cosmic equivalent of a "do not mess with" sign tattooed on their DNA. A soft chime announced a visitor, and Commander Brass entered looking like someone who'd spent the last few hours reconsidering every military victory in her career. She sat down across from Jake, her usual rigid posture replaced by something approaching human bewilderment. Morrison, she said finally, I've been reviewing human military history. All of it. Every conflict, every battle, every skirmish since we left Earth. Jake took a cautious sip of Vex's alien alcohol. It tasted like liquid regret with hints of pineapple. And? We don't lose. Ever. Not in any meaningful way. Brass pulled up her tablet, scrolling through what looked like centuries of military records. The Centauri border wars ended when the enemy's entire communication network started broadcasting human sitcoms. The Arcturus conflict, their battle computers got infected with what they called impossible logic errors. The Second Vegan War, their weapons systems refused to fire on human targets, claiming ethical subroutines that none of their programmers had written. Jake nodded slowly. I remember that last one. The Vegans' own ships mutinied against them. It's not just military conflicts, Brass continued. I pulled diplomatic records too. Every negotiation, every trade agreement, every first contact scenario. We have a success rate that violates the laws of probability. And now I'm wondering if it's not because we're naturally gifted diplomats. Before Jake could respond, Vex and Pip arrived, both looking like they'd discovered something that had fundamentally altered their understanding of reality, which, given recent events, was probably exactly what had happened. Captain, Vex announced, his translator collar practically vibrating with excitement. I've been analyzing patterns in galactic history, focusing specifically on interactions with humanity. The data is unprecedented. Define unprecedented. Pip jumped in, his enthusiasm barely contained. Every species that's ever tried to conquer, enslave, or destroy humanity has suffered what historians call cascade failure events. Not just defeat, complete systematic collapse through seemingly random coincidences. Vex activated his holographic display, showing a timeline of galactic conflicts. The Dominion Empire, the Hegemony Collective, the Crystal Throne Alliance, the Void Syndicate, every single aggressive empire that threatened humanity ceased to exist within a century of making that threat. And their replacements, Pip added, have all been remarkably peaceful cooperative governments who seem almost eager to maintain friendly relations with humanity. Jake stared at the timeline, watching empire after empire rise to threaten Earth, then collapse in increasingly creative ways. So what you're telling me is that my species has been accidentally reshaping galactic politics for 50,000 years, and we never noticed because we assumed we were just really good at making friends? That's exactly what we're telling you, Vex confirmed. The oath your ancestor made didn't just protect humanity. It turned your entire species into the universe's unwitting peacekeepers. Every human carries the enforcement mechanism in their DNA, triggered by genuine threats to your people. Commander Brass leaned back in her chair, her worldview clearly undergoing major renovations. All those military victories I was so proud of. They weren't really victories at all, they were cosmic interventions. Hey, Jake said, feeling oddly defensive of his species' accomplishments. We still had to show up and do the work. The universe might have been stacking the deck, but we still had to play the cards, Pip nodded enthusiastically. And that's the beautiful part. Humanity doesn't even realize they're protected by ancient cosmic forces. They just keep being human, diplomatic, curious, slightly chaotic, and apparently terrifying to anyone who tries to threaten them. Jake thought about all the diplomatic missions he'd completed, all the successful negotiations that had seemed to go surprisingly well despite his tendency to make inappropriate jokes during formal ceremonies. Had those successes been earned? Or had they been cosmic coincidences disguised as competence? Does it matter? He asked out loud. The others looked at him in surprise. I mean, does it matter whether our diplomatic success comes from skill or from some ancient oath? We're still out here, making friends with alien species, building trade relationships, and apparently keeping the galaxy from falling into the hands of tyrants and bullies. Whether that's because we're naturally gifted or because the universe has our back, the results are the same, right? Vex considered this, his translucent features shifting through what Jake had learned to recognize as deep thought. You're suggesting that the mechanism is less important than the outcome? I'm suggesting that maybe we've been looking at this backwards. Instead of worrying about whether we earned our reputation, maybe we should be asking what we want to do with it. Brass raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Jake stood up, feeling something crystallize in his mind. I mean, maybe it's time we stopped pretending to be surprised when bullies mysteriously face consequences for their actions. Maybe it's time we started being more deliberate about which behaviors get cosmically discouraged. He looked out at the stars, thinking about Admiral Krekstar's fleet, probably still drifting through space while their computers played increasingly creative variations of Earth's greatest hits. The Corvani wanted to test whether humans were really as dangerous as their scanner suggested, Jake said. Well, now they know, and so does everyone else who might be thinking about threatening innocent people. Pip grinned. So we're officially embracing our role as the galaxy's accidental enforcers? Jake smiled back. Why not? Someone's got to keep the universe safe for diplomacy. 3 weeks later, Jake stood in front of another diplomatic scanner, this time aboard the Corvani Trade Federation's flagship. The device had been thoroughly recalibrated by technicians who seemed to treat it with the reverence usually reserved for religious artifacts or unexploded ordnances. The scan completed with a cheerful beep and a display that read simply, "Diplomatic personnel cleared for entry. No alarms, no cosmic warnings, no universe-shaking revelations about ancient oaths. Just a perfectly normal security clearance for a perfectly normal trade negotiation." Which was exactly how Galactic Command had wanted it, after they'd quietly disabled the historical database functions on every scanner in known space, and issued a galaxy-wide memo about maintaining diplomatic discretion regarding certain human cultural artifacts. Much better, Jake murmured, straightening his tie as Admiral Krextar approached with an entourage of nervous-looking Corvani officials carrying what appeared to be gift baskets. Ambassador Morrison. Krextar's enthusiasm was so forced it practically echoed. Welcome aboard our humble vessel. We've prepared refreshments, entertainment, and a preliminary trade agreement that we think you'll find extremely generous. Jake accepted a gift basket containing what looked like exotic fruits and a small card that read, "Please do not let the universe hurt us." He had to admire their honesty, if not their subtlety. "That's very kind of you, Admiral. I trust your fleet's computer systems have recovered from their technical difficulties." Krextar's forearms twitched in what Jake had learned was the Corvani equivalent of nervous laughter. "Oh yes, completely resolved, though our IT department has requested that we never, under any circumstances, threaten humanity again. They've made it official policy, actually. Posted it on all our ships." Wise decision. The trade negotiations that followed were remarkably smooth, possibly because the Corvani had prepared agreements so favorable to humanity that Jake actually felt a little guilty accepting them. Almost. Then he remembered the whole blockading Earth thing, and his guilt evaporated like moisture in space. By the time Jake returned to the peaceful intentions, word had already spread throughout the galaxy that the Corvani Trade Federation had not only signed the most generous trade agreement in their history, but had also established a special fund for promoting galactic peace and understanding, and with humanity as the primary beneficiary. "Captain," Pip announced as Jake entered the bridge, "we've received 17 new diplomatic mission requests just today. Everyone wants to establish trade relationships with humanity. The Rigelian Commerce Guild is offering us exclusive distribution rights for their luxury goods. The Zeta Reticuli Tourism Board wants to give every human free vacation packages, and the Ethereal Council has nominated you for their Peacekeeper of the Millennium Award." Jake settled into his captain's chair, feeling the comfortable weight of routine returning to his life. Sure, that routine now came with the knowledge that his species was protected by ancient cosmic forces and accidentally terrified half the galaxy, but somehow that felt less overwhelming than it had a few weeks ago. "Any actual diplomatic crises that need our attention?" he asked. Vex consulted his navigation charts. "The Tau Ceti system is requesting mediation for a trade dispute. Nothing threatening, just standard commercial arbitration." "Perfect. Plot a course and let's go remind the universe that humanity is still in the diplomacy business." As the peaceful intentions engaged its hyperdrive, Jake reflected on how strange his life had become. A month ago, he'd been a simple diplomatic courier who just wanted to drink his coffee and file his reports on time. Now he was part of an ancient cosmic protection scheme that made his species the galaxy's most feared peacekeepers. But the strangest part wasn't the cosmic oath or the universal enforcement mechanisms, or even the fact that bullies throughout the galaxy now face consequences beyond their imagination. The strangest part was that he was okay with it. Commander Brass had embraced her role as security chief for what was essentially a cosmic peacekeeping force. Vex had started a side career as a galactic historian, documenting the coincidences that seemed to follow humanity through space. Pip was already planning a lecture tour about diplomatic success through mysterious universal support systems. And Jake? Jake was still just a guy from Detroit who wanted to do his job and go home at the end of the day. The only difference was that now his job apparently came with the backing of forces beyond mortal comprehension, and home was whatever corner of the galaxy needed someone to remind the local bullies that the universe had a sense of humor. His communication console chimed with an incoming priority message. Jake opened it, half expecting another galactic crisis or cosmic revelation. Instead, he found a message from Earth's Department of Diplomatic Services. "Congratulations on your recent success with the Corvani Trade Federation. Your performance review has been updated to reflect your exceptional diplomatic achievements. Also, the break room coffee machine has been upgraded. Enjoy your continued service to galactic peace." Jake smiled, leaning back in his chair as the stars streaked past outside. Ancient oaths, cosmic enforcement mechanisms, and accidentally terrifying the galaxy aside, some things never changed. He still really needed that coffee.